Let me provide you with a really quick kind of introduction to an idea called Gantt charting, right? Now, Google Gantt charting. This is not, this short 5-minute clip or whatever it ends up being will not cover all of the detail that you can go into with Gantt charting. But what I do find is a simple version of Gantt charting can really help you and your team to work out who does what when, right? Now, Gantt charting is really just a way of mapping out your timeline for when to get things done. So before this, you need to have worked out what needs doing. Okay. Now there will be varying levels of detail in that. You don't necessarily want a Gantt chart that I don't know that Bob needs to make sure he brings his pencil on the day, or remind Bob to to remind his wife that she needs to come at 7 o'clock. But you've got to work out in your plan how much detail you want to include and then how much detail you want to leave to the individual. So if you think about it, in terms of project areas. So let's do a Gantt chart for an exercise festival or an exercise event, sports day, community sports day, that's a better name for it. And so if we think, what are the areas that we need to organise in this sports day? The areas we need to organise in this sports day, advertising, and some of these are pretty standard in exactly what you've got to do for most events. So we've got advertising, but then we've also got equipment. And we might have things like staffing and all of that, but let's just leave it that simple for the moment. Now these are areas, right? So you need to break up your project into areas. So advertising, we might have Facebook, newspaper. You get the idea. Now, from your plan about what needs doing, you actually end up with a series of things to do, okay? So you might have a few things to do. I'm not going to write them in here. It's going to get a bit dull. So you might have a few things to do for each of these things. Right? Now, our issue that we're trying to solve is the timeline. So what you do, and you can do it on a piece of paper as a group with sticky notes for that matter, or you can do it in Excel or Word, both of those work, is you want to think about your dates. Now, if you're organising an event that goes over months, obviously months are going to be at the top, but if you're organising an event that, you've got kind of a 2-week plan, it'll be days. Very rarely would you do a Gantt chart for something that was within a day. Generally, it's longer term projects. But let's say we've got January, Feb, March. So we're kind of mapping how long we've got to get things done. Now, obviously, what you need to start with is the event. So where are we going to end up? Well, we know that our event is at the start of April. So we've got a due date here. Everything has to happen before then, okay? And basically what you're going to do is you're going to map out when things need to be done, okay? So if we think that the first component of Facebook needs to be done straight away, then we would go, okay, well, we're going to put it about here. But the next question is, how long is it going to take? Okay. Now, this isn't how long would it take sitting at a desk, I would argue, in community work. It's how long will it take between me asking a person to do it, them doing it, me okaying it. Okay. How long does it take from start to end? And estimate how long that's going to take and overestimate, right? So let's say that we reckon it's going to take a week, and basically you draw a band that's a week wide. So we go, okay, this work is going to start at the beginning of February and be finished at the end of the first week. Okay, so they're going to have that text written. Now we also know that the newspaper content, there's no point sending that through too early, they'll forget that you existed, but someone needs to write the content. Now that can happen soon, but let's leave it till February. And again, it's a week. Okay? So what we're doing is we're kind of mapping out all of the different things that need doing. Now, sometimes these tasks are contingent on one another. In other words, I've got to finish this task before I can move on to this task, right? And that's fairly straightforward, okay? So there's no point saying post to Facebook if the text hasn't been written and approved, right? So they're contingent on one another. But there are other things that can be done simultaneously. So if we jump down to equipment, someone can actually be working on this area at exactly the same time. So maybe organising to hire equipment or making those phone calls can happen here, but you've got lots of equipment, so you're going to say, oh, it's going to take 3 weeks, right? Doesn't matter that it's happening at the same time as this, it's going to take 3 weeks. Once you've got that organised, you can pretty much forget about that line until the end when maybe you need to do a reminder, okay? So maybe you need to remind the person collecting it. And so what you're doing is mapping out the process of work and how long it will take. Okay, now this does take some time. What inevitably happens is you inevitably kind of map everything out and then go, oh my goodness, we're not going to be ready till April, 2022. Then you move it back, and that's why it's really good doing it with sticky notes or with a digital tool. But what you're trying to do is set yourself some deadlines. Remembering back to the principles, if you don't have deadlines, it just takes forever to get stuff done. So if you think when you're looking at different areas, go, okay, are there points at which we need to kind of say, we can forget about that, or this is done. And so maybe you go, okay, well, all of our advertising stuff really should pretty much be in the bag here. And so at this point, we're going to check, okay? We use a little diamond. We're going to check to make sure that all of those things have done. Now, the reason that checking is important is because you might have 20 different people working on this stuff. So you as a project manager need to know beforehand when, and I say when intentionally because it's not a matter of if, but when people are late. Okay, you need to know before that actually causes a problem over here. Now, this process, there's heaps of YouTube clips on this, dig into it a bit deeper, but at the very basics, you want to outline the basic things that need doing and timeline when they need doing. And this will take a huge amount of pressure off, but it will also put pressure on when it's required. So if your working group get together and they go, you know what, we haven't organised the equipment or the advertising, and we're halfway through February, and that was our timeline. And so then they go, okay, what are we going to do? We need to spend more time and get this stuff sorted in the next few days. So it just provides you some checks and balances. Give it a go, see how you go.